You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work.
This morning with the sun down shining in, I found my mind in a brown paper bag, but then I tripped on a cloud and fell 8 miles high.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is
Stuart Ward. Hello.
Hey, Stuart, welcome back. I'm quite pleased to have you back. I haven't done a podcast in a while. Two, I completely dropped the ball and forgot to tell you what time we were doing this. It was a very Lebowski, very dude sort of move between the two of us, I think, to not know when we were actually doing this.
That's fine. I wasn't privy to all the new shit.
So we're doing the Big Lebowski, which I will be in the also continuing on in the vein of Lebowski. I don't have up the IMDb page. I did not look up anything about the movie beforehand. I am not privy to the new shit either.
That's a very laid back and dude way of going about this, I think.
I'm gonna try and be as dude like as possible. Yeah, So did you see this in the theater when it came out?
I did not. I saw this would have come out in 98, and at that time I was at college and I was assistant manager at the cool video rental in my college town. And I saw it when it came on video because I saw everything that came on video at that time. And it was one of a string of really great movies that it seemed like right around then we were getting a lot of kind of mid-budget to low budget smart independent movies, or if not independent, at least, really well written, kind of aimed at adults. You had around the same time, you had Zero Effect, you had Out of Sight. Of course, I can't think of too many off the top of my head. A Simple Plan, Palmetto, I think, a whole bunch of these great kind of like crime movies for adults were hitting video at that time. Suicide Kings, that was another great one. And it seemed like they were just coming out week after week, and this one was one that I hadn't heard about when it was in theaters, and when it came on video it kind of didn't arrive with any kind of fanfare, but it held on like crazy. And especially in a college town, that movie was always rented out, just constantly. People talked about it, word of mouth spread, and just years later people were still renting it out, even long after it had fallen off the new release wall and stuff. And I had a friend actually who was, at the time, he was working with me. I can't remember his name, sadly, but he was such a big fan of this movie that he had a Big Lebowski count on his answering machine. Back then we had answering machines instead of voicemail. And so every time you would call him, when I would call him to say if he could pick up a shift or something at the video store, he would say, "Hey, this is so-and-so." I can't remember his name, sadly. The Big Lebowski count is now at 53. Meaning he's now watched the Big Lebowski 53 times.
Oh my God.
And it got up there. He basically watched it every single day. But yeah, people went nuts for this movie.
Yeah, I did see it in the theater. This was kind of during my anything the Coen brothers put out, I will go see. Which had been true since I'd rented Miller's Crossing. I had seen Raising Arizona on VHS when that came out. My brother had somehow seen it in the theater, so he was like, "We've got to watch this thing when it comes out." So, and then I just kind of like, to me, they could kind of do no wrong. And during this period, they kind of couldn't. But I had gone to one of it wasn't the art house theater, but the kind of like more prestige theater that was in North Austin at the time with Jamie to go see this. And it was funny. I walked out of it and I was like, that was pretty good. I don't think I liked it as much as like, I can't remember what else. Probably Fargo had been out right before then. And this was the one that became the cult movie of all the Coen brothers movies, which is kind of strange to me. In some ways. In other ways, I think it's also maybe their most accessible movie. It certainly wasn't going to be like A Serious Man was not going to be the one people watched like over and over and over. So it's been interesting to watch the arc on this, and 25 years later, it's quoted routinely. It's become just kind of a part of American pop culture in a way that is a little surprising, I think, to me, given how specific the movie is. And maybe that is why people really glom on to that. But it also works with some really broad comedy, which is something that they've done well since Raising Arizona. So I find it interesting, especially having had read, I think, 80%, 90% of what Raymond Chandler's put out at this point, that this is a Raymond Chandler, like, just full stop. Like I remember kind of getting into like my second Raymond Chandler novel, which I didn't start reading until like maybe like 2005, 2006, and going like, oh, like I understood it was supposed to be a detective thing, but I didn't realize this specificity of the like Chandlerisms in this movie, but completely stood on their head. This is not Philip Marlowe.
No.
And it's fascinating to watch one of these mysteries unfold kind of in spite of everybody involved. It basically posits a world in which this stuff's going to work itself out one way or another.
Does the mystery actually get solved though? I'm not sure because I mean, I've seen this movie many times now, enough to have, several quotes that, I mean, my wife and I quote this movie to each other constantly. And I watched it recently just in anticipation of this podcast, and I couldn't actually tell you what how the mystery is solved, right? I mean,
it is solved by Bunny coming back home and driving into the fountain.
Right, I guess so. And I guess Larry Sellers keeps the money.
I am pretty sure off-screen Jackie Treehorn has sent his guys to go to Larry Sellers.
Right, okay.
And we just never see it.
Because dude does tell him about Larry Sellers, so
yeah,
he could probably do that. But we should probably do like a plot synopsis, right? You have
oh boy. Yeah.
I don't know that you can do a plot synopsis for The Big Lebowski. I think the plot is largely beside the point.
Yes. And I think that's kind of the fascinating thing about this movie is and some people believe that about Chandler movies or books too, and thus the movies, that it's much more about like the character interactions and the dialogue. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that the crimes that are committed in them are definitely a social comment. Like, you don't get to The Long Goodbye without some serious social commentary or internal reflection. But yeah, so the Big Lebowski is about a guy named The Dude, whose real name is Jeff Lebowski, who has no job, and I'm not sure how he gets by, but he does. And
I was wondering that myself. I was like, yeah, how is he making rent on this apartment? He doesn't even know what day of the week it is and stuff.
Well, I mean, he clearly doesn't because he's getting by his land going to see his landlord shows
Yeah,
and his
right.
landlord kicking how far his rent is down the road.
That's right.
So yeah, he's mistaken for a millionaire or supposed millionaire, also named Jeff Lebowski, who owes whose his wife owes a pornographer named Jackie Treehorn
It is a
thirty
great name.
million dollars. It was a lot of
I think
money.
it's $1 million. Yeah.
$1 million.
Yeah.
And he so Jeff gets beat up, and all he knows is that happens, and a dude pees on his rug in his living room while he's laying there, and he's very upset because it really tied the room together. And he's telling his friends about it, and they say, go see the actual Jeff Lebowski, and he's responsible for your rug. His friend Walter Sobchak, who is played by John Goodman, who is probably the character I relate to far more than Jeff Lebowski.
Immortalized by John Goodman, I'd say.
Yes.
Fantastic performance.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of the hornets that live in my head that I see in Walter Sobchak. And anyway, he goes to the Big Lebowski and is told, no, you're not going to get anything. But then later, not too many days later, his wife disappears. He gets the Big Lebowski gets a comment or a fax with
a ransom note.
Note. And he brings in the dude to do the money exchange. And the dude screws it up, thanks to Walter, who is constantly screwing things up. And they then have to solve the mystery of what's happened to Bunny and what's going on as things become increasingly more complex and confusing. And characters such as, I should say Bunny Lebowski is played by Tara Reid, who has had a interesting career in life over the years. Julianne Moore plays Lebowski's stepdaughter. Yeah, Maud to perfection. Brant Lebowski's minion is played by the late Philip Seymour Hoffman. Donnie, who is a bowler, is played by Steve Buscemi. Flea plays a nihilist. Peter Stormare plays another nihilist. I'm kind of just
It's a fantastic cast. It's absolutely stacked cast.
The cast is insane. Jimmy Dale Gilmore, who is a popular musician, especially here in Texas, plays one of the bowlers named Smokey.
Smokey.
Yeah, John Turturro is the Jesus. And good golly, man, you could just keep going for days on this cast. Making sure I hit all the highlights here. Man, who played Jackie Treehorn? It was somebody really famous. Was it? Yeah, it was Ben Gazzara. And John Polito plays the private Snoop. And Amy Mann is in there for a minute. Yeah, anyway, it's just like person after person who was in the zeitgeist during this period. It's a lot of kind of the indie darling actors like Peter Stormare and Turturro and Polito, who were kind of in Buscemi, who were all just kind of in that scene. You'd see like 3 or 4 movies a year with these people in them at the time.
And don't forget Sam Elliott.
Oh, and Sam Elliott
as the narrator.
As the narrator / God /
the spirit of the West is kind of how I took him.
Yeah. Why that's in there, don't know.
So
not clear. The Coen brothers know.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were talking about the Raymond Chandler, the structure of it, right? Being from like old pulp detective novels. I think there's a lot of purposeful imagery from Westerns. I think it's purposeful too so the movie came out in 98, but it's set in like 90, 91, whenever we were going into Desert Storm 1, right? Gulf War 1 or whatever. And because as I've watched the movie so many times, what I see is the theme that kind of bubbles to the surface and all the weird stuff that happens and seemingly random things that happen is, I guess, boy, how would I even say that? It's like, oh gosh, I feel like the Western stuff is there as like a point of like, I don't know, American swagger or masculinity, like making itself known, because you have this character. So Jeffrey Lebowski, they establish in the 60s was like a big deal hippie, right? They say, they give you a couple hints to where, what did he say? He wrote the original version of the Port Huron Statement before it was watered down, right? Right. He inserted himself, almost Forrest Gump-like. You don't know if it's actually true, but at least that's the image that he projects of himself, that he was this big deal guy into the hippie movement. And now he's kind of nothing. And he's just kind of like letting his friend Walter whisper in his ear and let him instigate and take these small infractions and make everything worse. And Walter is defined, of course, by his inability to let anything go. Right, Walter, he served in Vietnam, and he's still in his head in Vietnam and brings it up in every conversation. And that aspect of him is very familiar to me because it was my stepfather. But yeah, it's kind of like the altercation that they have. Isn't Smokey who slips his toe over the line?
Yeah.
Right. So Smokey slips his toe over the line, and Walter refuses to let it go. And dude just wants to let it go, and Walter won't let it go, and eventually draws a gun on him in the in the bowling alley, and the cops were called, and they had to forfeit their win, right? And I kind of felt like that is like a microcosm of the whole thing. If the dude had just let it go from the beginning and not felt the need to respond, which is where the Gulf War thing comes in, because he's this guy who used to be all into the peace movement is now quoting George Bush, the first George Bush, as he's watching on the news, right? He's like, this aggression will not stand, right? So that's kind of what I take away from it, as far as I don't know, a theme.
Yeah. I think that they found some personalities that, like, look, you live long enough and you know a Donnie, a dude, and you definitely know a Walter at some point in some capacity. And they were having a lot of fun kind of putting, especially the dude and Walter, kind of time over time in these different sequences through what would be a Chandler mystery, and how they're their own worst enemies. They're constantly screwing things up. It has nothing to do with the genius or how sly. That's maybe one of the big differences is in a Chandler mystery, there's people who are very sly and they get the drop on Philip Marlowe. And then there's people Philip Marlowe can kind of shake down. And in this movie, everyone's kind of an idiot, except for maybe Jackie Treehorn. And including the Big Lebowski, including Brandt, like everyone's kind of filling their role and playing it to the nth degree. And I think that it's really, really fascinating to see how they're able to kind of write these characters who are fun on screen, but when you know these people in real life, they're a lot. They're the people you often find quite exhausting to spend any time with. The guy who won't let anything go, the guy who's got to be involved and insert himself into whatever's going on. And Donnie, who's the guy who does not understand ever what's happening, and and it constantly is asking you to catch him up, right? It's a fascinating little triumvirate they put together there. But yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, you seem like you were about to say something there.
Oh no, I was just thinking, like we said before, the plot is beside the point, right? It's just to me what makes this movie stand out is that it's such a joy to watch the characters kind of bounce off each other, right? The scenes for me, the best scenes are in the bowling alley between Dude and Walter, and Donnie, because the dialogue is just it's so good. It's fun to listen to them, you know, call and respond. It's almost like they're doing like a who's on first routine.
Yeah,
you know, with one character interrupting the other character. It's like a juggling act. It's like there's three different conversations happening between the three of them, and they're all happening at a slightly different pace. And it's so, it's just so much fun to watch. A lot of the other movies that I called out before, like there were good crime dramas coming out, and crime dramas are not usually a thing that is a genre for me, because it's about people making really bad decisions and ruining their lives, and it's kind of depressing. But in this case, I really enjoy just the unexpected and the skillful way that they're able to bounce off each other. It's fun to watch, and it's like one of the most quotable movies of all time. To me, it is. Anyway, there's so many lines from this movie that get quoted at my house constantly. One of the biggest ones is when John Goodman is saying, "Am I wrong? Am I wrong?" Right? Yeah. And the response is, "No, Walter, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole." And aside from I feel like that being a theme that carries through the movie, where someone is constantly making things worse, right, by retaliating. That's something that I encounter in real life so much, where it's like, it's not that you're wrong. It's just that you don't have to be such an asshole about it. You don't have to like assert yourself so much, and be so oblivious to the people around you. That's a quote that we use a lot.
Yeah, but the Walter character is a fascinating bit to me. And when I saw it the first time, I was trying so hard to puzzle out, like, what was the intention of the Coen brothers through that. And it's just not something you see in any other detective fiction. You'll always have the thing of like the hapless friend who is constantly getting himself into trouble, and asking for help to get out of it or whatever, which is maybe one of my least favorite crime trope things. And
Walter's the one getting Dude into trouble.
Yeah, constantly.
he's the instigator.
The funny thing to me about it is, at the very beginning of the film, when they're trying to figure out what to do with the money, or we'll figure out what's going on, and when Dude knows he's gonna get paged and he has to go deliver the money, he is right. He's cracked the case without ever thinking about it.
She kidnapped herself.
Yeah. It's like he's come to the most logical conclusion of what is going on here, and
he could have just stepped away.
Walter is working off of through the whole movie is that Jeff said that Dude said that. And he never lets it go, no matter what's going on.
And he's so certain.
Yeah.
He's so certain that the Dude is right. The Dude's not actually, he's not actually that confident in his own theory.
Right.
But, oh man, another thing I was going to say, but I completely forgot. Hi, Katie.
Hello.
No, another thing about this movie though is that it's something as someone who watched and watched people's reactions to movies that they brought back from the video store at the time. This is a movie that pretty much everyone over the age of 16 loved, no matter what their taste was. Yeah, I could recommend The Big Lebowski to anyone. I remember I didn't have a lot in common with my mother-in-law at the time. But she came over one time while I was watching The Big Lebowski, and she laughed and laughed at that movie. So that was one of the few things that we could like find some fellowship on. It was, I believe, the scene that really cracked her up was a dude dropping the joint in his lap, and then trying to put out the fire with the beer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just a little bit of fantastic, physical comedy in the middle of everything else.
That definitely reminded me of a guy or two I knew in college. of what happened? Well, I dropped the brooch, and then yeah.
Another thing it had going for it was the soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
I mean, much like a lot of, I think we had, and I kind of perceived in the late 90s, this was maybe kicked off by Pulp Fiction. We had a lot of movies come out with like a really good soundtrack of kind of oldies in there,
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of those. And I believe it was produced by T-Bone Burnett.
Yeah.
T-Bone Burnett. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had the soundtrack because every single thing on there was fantastic except for Hotel California. I would skip that one.
It had also the first time I'd ever heard I believe it was Townes Van Zandt cover of Dead Flowers. Yeah. And that's kind of a staple now. They play it on the radio here in Austin quite a bit. Townes is originally from Texas.
I couldn't believe that was Kenny Rogers.
Yeah.
In that just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. it didn't sound like Kenny Rogers.
Yeah. And talk about Raymond Chandler. There's always times in the books where the character gets drugged or hit over the head, or he just gets incapacitated by the baddies, once or twice a book or movie. And in some of the movies, they've tried to do some pretty interesting visuals, like Murder My Sweet. There's some really interesting visuals when he kind of goes under. And in this one, you get the flying carpet scene when Maud knocks him out, or Maud's guy, and then of course you have the famous bowling horn whatever amalgamation music number. And that's the thing of this movie is with the first time you see it, you have absolutely no idea what's going on, and then they throw that at you, and it's just hysterical. It just comes absolutely out of nowhere. It's incredibly well designed and thought out, and it's completely in character for the dude. It's just a really good sequence. And
that sequence that had Julianne Moore was in a Viking, like a Valkyrie outfit,
mm-hmm.
but with bowling ball breastplates.
Yeah.
Right. And the album cover was that shot of them like bowling together with her in that outfit.
Yeah, and that's been the cover on the DVD and a few other things. So I'm sure that's very confusing if that's the first image you've seen. That's definitely this movie image to put on anything. The mystery itself, when they start to untangle it, is really pretty well done. I will say. And people always say, well, I don't know what happens in The Big Sleep. I can't tell you now what happens in The Big Sleep, but every time I watch The Big Sleep, I'm like, well, it's A, B, C, D, E. And then people always go, oh yeah. So I don't really know how that gets so confusing. This one makes a lot of sense to me. There's just confusion about where Bunny is. That's it. Like,
Except that dude never actually figures anything out. I mean, he sort of guesses correctly at the beginning that Bunny kidnapped herself.
yeah.
But then for the rest of the movie, every person he talks to floats a different theory at him, and he just accepts whatever they say. Bunny tells him what she what she knows, and he's just like, okay, that sounds right. And the Big Lebowski, and he's like, yeah, I guess that's right. Jackie Treehorn says, what he thinks is going on, he's like, yeah, I guess that's right.
Well, I mean, and that's why it's so funny to me that like the first thing out of his mouth is exactly what happened.
Yeah. But by sheer luck, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's working with what he knows, and it's
Yeah.
just not that complicated. But everyone has got their own agendas, so they're all making it super complicated. The thing that makes it, of course, really complicated is the finding out, the Big Lebowski never had any money, and his dirty undies were in the bag or whatever, I guess phone books.
Right.
And the fact they never bothered to look was very on character, very on point. But yeah, it's I think, they put enough of a real feeling mystery around it so that, but something that could propel itself, whether or not anyone was trying to solve it. That I don't know. I don't know. Did you ever see the movie Laura from like 44?
I have seen the movie Laura, but it's been a while.
Yeah, the first half of the movie, spoiler alert, is everyone trying to solve what happened to Laura that when she got murdered. And then Laura just shows up halfway through the movie and you find out that was somebody else. And it's not a joke. I mean, it's just what happens in the movie. But it's like the first time you see it, you're like, the hell is going, like nothing is structured like this.
Well, in the Big Lebowski too, I mean, the mystery is mostly solved as much as it's going to be solved, like you said, by Bunny showing up.
Yeah.
But then the movie continues to go.
Yeah.
Kind of hammering home that the mystery isn't the point, right?
So what do you think the point is of Donnie dying?
I would say it's just it's Donnie was like sort of the most I don't know, innocent of the three of them.
Yeah.
And it was like he's I guess the final consequence of them not just letting things go, of them continuing to try and work an angle and try and retaliate where retaliation is not needed, try to find a way to embezzle the money or steal the money, in some clever way. Finally, that's the best I can do, I guess. And also because it's definitely unexpected. Everything that happens, every scene ends with almost like, a cliffhanger in a way. Like just an unexpected thing happens at the end of each scene. And then you're left to like, well, what's going to happen now? And so I guess like in another way, I kind of felt like it during that fight. That was the weirdest thing that could have happened because they start to ramp up this big fight scene. And then it all stops because Donnie has a heart attack. Then there is no fight scene. Or I guess there is. It's really short, but still, it ends sort of anticlimactically, right?
Yeah, Jeff's trying to give him, or the dude's trying to give him $4,
right? And Donnie's like, "Here's my money. I don't care." Right?
Yeah.
Here you go. And so Donnie, who never had any skin in the game at all. All he wanted to do was show up and bowl, right? He becomes like finally the biggest victim of them all.
It's interesting. You said something earlier that made me think of like kind of what the consequence is, and because the thing that's repeated back to them, there's a lot of repeating things back, not the least of which is Jeff's constantly just taking, or the dude is constantly taking whatever is said to him and repeating it back out of context or incorrectly or whatever, including
such and such is not the issue here and stuff.
Yeah.
This will not stand. Yeah.
And one of the things that gets echoed back that it's not him is Walter's line about this is what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass. And that's what is said back to them by the nihilists when the fight starts. When Walter has, the irony of him yelling that is he's destroying a dude's car who has nothing to do with anything. It's the guy who lives across the street.
Right.
Larry. And maybe there's a thread there, maybe there's not to be picked up. But what are the consequences of that aggression that they're constantly kind of showing, or involvement where their involvement is not needed? Yeah, it's an interesting little bit.
It's hard, it's difficult to put into words, I guess, as I've demonstrated amply. But yeah, that's the feeling that I get watching the movie, is that now anyway, is that it's all in that. There's a bit where dude says, I could be just sitting here with pee stains on my rug.
Yeah.
And instead I have like gangsters after me, and like my entire apartment's trashed and my car has disappeared, and and all this other stuff.
Yeah, the slow death of the dude's car over the course of the film is absolutely amazing.
Yes.
And all of his worldly possessions are pretty much destroyed by the end of the film. Whatever he actually owned, which wasn't much,
except for the Credence.
Well, I would assume that was still in the car when it went up, though.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Did you notice that when he's relaxing, he listens to bowling sounds?
Yeah, whale sounds and bowling sounds. Yeah,
but whale sounds and it just sounds of like bowling balls hitting pins.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. When you first, this movie is just so out of left field. It's such a non sequitur. I don't know how it speaks to people, but it definitely did. I remember it became like, very popular at the video store, like I said, and then years went by, and like a small fan movement kind of came out of it, to where you have like, people writing books about it. You have conventions, and people like coming up with like jokey, the Church of Dudism and stuff. And a lot of the books it makes me a little uncomfortable to see it, because it's like how to be more like the dude. And I don't know how much they're joking. And that's why when we first kind of floated talking about this movie, I was like, I don't know if I want to talk about this movie, because it's one of those movies like Fight Club, where I feel like the fans have kind of ruined it a little bit,
Yeah, I didn't know how much to talk about that in this, but I think it's worth discussing, because it's one of the reasons I don't talk about the movie a lot.
I feel like people take it real seriously. People actually do look up to the dude, and they want to be like him. They think that is and I can't actually tell how serious they're being about it. Did you ever, in the 90s, there was a series of books around something called the Church of the Subgenius? Did you ever see that?
I still have Revelation X on my.
Okay. Yeah. And it was all about, and it was I took it as a joke, but it was basically like a cult, and it was like a self-help cult, and it was trying to get you to, rearrange your life in order to achieve the highest goal, which is like the state of slack.
Yeah.
Right. Slack, which was like the Church of the Subgenius version of Zen, I think, which is just not giving a shit about anything, right? And it was funny, but I knew a couple of people who took that a little too seriously. And that's how I feel about maybe the fans of The Big Lebowski, much as I sort of count myself as a fan, because I do love the movie. I've seen it, many times. I've owned many copies of it. I quote the movie. But yeah, I feel like there are people that are not really getting that the dude is not a person to aspire to.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's not an aspirational figure. Yeah, and it's funny because for all the like he's supposed to be slack, he takes on the role of the detective pretty firmly about halfway through the film. Like he's doing it in a dude way, but he's now becoming active. He's not the uncarved block anymore. He's, engaging with the things that are occurring around him. He's not reacting. And yeah, I mean, I could go off about the Church of the Subgenius stuff because I think that's a really good parallel. I mean, there was a documentary that came out maybe like a year ago about how much were these guys kidding, and they'll say, well, we were totally kidding, but we were very serious about the fact we were kidding, but we're kidding about being serious. And you're just like,
that's funny.
Yeah, that tracks for these guys. But yeah, I had a guy who I knew, I won't say in what context, because people I know listen to this podcast, who he definitely, I flat out asked him, are you just trying to be the dude at one point? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, don't, man. Like, that's not a thing to, like, in the context I knew him, it was especially bad. He worked for me.
So it's possible I'm reading too much into it. So I want to preface by saying that it's possible I'm reading too much into it. But is the movie itself, by making the bad guys nihilists, saying anything?
Yeah.
About the dude, maybe? I feel like maybe not. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But again, this is a guy who, at least by his self-description, used to believe in things, right? Mm-hmm. Used to stand for things, used to care about things, and now really doesn't. And I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing that I'm supposed to have picked up on, or if it's just a thing that I inserted into it. But
I think it's worth bouncing against the wall and see if it sticks. I think that's an interesting idea. I think you put more thought into it than the Coen brothers did, but
maybe.
I mean, I think in the context of the 90s, of people were in their own way not as black and white as they are now, but people were standing up and kind of saying they have these various ethos, and it was basically, I think, poking fun at some of these people who thought they had, this intellectual stance, and their stance was frankly absurd. And I mean, it's a ridiculous thing to say you're to get organized and try and like have a club of nihilists like that. I can't really think of anything like goofier than like, we're really serious. It's like being really serious about being atheist. It's like you're talking about the absence of something, right? I mean, it's like if you're like super active, if you're a really active atheist, you're just being a provocateur, right? And that's, I think, part of what they were getting at with that, where Lebowski'd been a provocateur, or the dude. And I think we should talk about the fact that the actual Big Lebowski is a complete fraud.
I didn't know that. I knew that it was based on a real guy.
No.
I'm sorry.
Big Lebowski.
You mean the Big Lebowski, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's interesting that for all of the, like, you don't, go get a job, go get a haircut, and all this, and you, of course, at the end of the day, he's also a slacker. He just happens to be a well-heeled slacker who is pretending as if he's been wildly successful. And he may be a lot more like the dude than he ever would want to admit, right? I mean, what has he done with his money? He's hanging out, and he has Brandt doing everything for him, and he's married a porn star who's stealing his money.
He's convinced people that he's important.
Yeah.
and that he's a self-made man, right? Which feels like couldn't be more timely with like conservatives really haven't changed at all.
Well, and it's also like two totally different like paths out of the, where people were headed during the, Chicago 68 convention, right? I mean, it's the hippies need to all get cleaned up, and it's like, well, what happened to the guy who didn't, and who was the guy who was telling him to get cleaned up? And they're we're not so different, you and I.
Right, yeah.
So I found that to be, I mean, it's both very Chandler-esque as a kind of reveal late in the game, to kind of give away the game, but it's also, I think, an interesting commentary on who gets to tell other people that they're not doing the right thing. So,
and it just seems to ring true in real life. The people who yell the loudest about, I built this myself, I did this myself. The more you pick it apart, the more you find out that they're really ignoring a lot of things, a lot of privileges that that they're conveniently leaving out. Right.
Yeah, 100%. It's the old Ayn Rand belief. But yeah, it's a really interesting and I think that's maybe why people keep coming back to it. I mean, it's doing that, and then it's also like got hallucinating Jeff Lebowski rolling over on his back and looking up the dancer's skirts, heading, in his dream sequence in the bowling alley. Like, I mean, it's just all over the place. It's like it took a million things and decided to pack them in to one film, into something that you really have to pay attention to kind of minute over minute. Why is the Jesus in there? Don't know.
Because it's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like a lot of stuff's in there just because it's funny.
Yeah.
And just because they like, it's there for texture, like all the bowling stuff,
Yeah.
But another thing that I thought is notable about the legacy of The Big Lebowski is I kind of felt like Jeff Bridges' public persona changed after this movie. Like up until The Big Lebowski, he was still kind of like handsome leading man guy. Mm-hmm. He was aging handsome leading man guy, but still like, and then, because I think the last thing I saw him in before this, or it might have been, maybe it was right after this, it was right around the same time, was Arlington Road, right? Which is real straight kind of political thriller, where he plays an everyman kind of guy. But after The Big Lebowski, especially, 10 years on, or I remember seeing him promoting, Tron Legacy and stuff. It feels like he's kind of embraced that persona a little bit in his public, the way that he carries himself, the way that he promotes himself, not that he fully is the dude, but that he definitely, he embraces that. I don't know, more than I would have expected.
And maybe it was freeing to him. Maybe that's who he was, and he just wasn't, he felt like he had to put on something else and didn't know what it was. But yeah, every time I see him in conversation now and anything, he's just like, it's kind of like McConaughey being Woodrow or whatever. It's
yeah
kind of who they actually are. They found a role that echoed them and communicated that to people. And I mean,
I wonder how much of it is, this is who I actually am, and how much of it is, this is who people want me to be. Yeah. So I'm just going to echo it back to them because that's what they want. Yeah.
And maybe he discovered a new side to himself through the role. I mean, yeah, definitely a possibility. I mean, because before that, he's doing like the Fabulous Baker Boys and stuff. I mean,
yeah. I remember the last thing I remember before Arlington Road and Big Lebowski, I remember, was White Squall, just like Dead Poet Society on the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was in major motion pictures. Maybe it was a little bit freeing to go do a Coen Brothers, sort of thing, where you could play something a bit different, and not just we need a square jawed, middle-aged white dude.
But he never was quirky before the Big Lebowski, I felt.
No.
He was always straight-laced. He was the leading man guy, which was, it was a little, and even I felt like it maybe even influenced his character choices a bit in Tron Legacy, because it felt like the character he played in Tron was extremely, I don't know, central casting, leading man. There wasn't much really about him that you could pick out. But then by the time he gets to Tron Legacy and he's been in the computer for 20 years or whatever it was, he talks kind of zen but kind of hippie, almost like the dude.
Yeah, that to me felt I didn't like Tron Legacy very much, but I did feel like that felt a little authentic. It felt like dude who's been in Silicon Valley too long.
Yeah.
And so I bought that, but also did definitely say he's being post dude Jeff Bridges.
Right. Yeah. I guess, yeah, you can see a difference in his persona before and after.
Yeah. And I can't really think of other actors who necessarily did that. I know it's something you read about when you read about like movies from like the 40s and 50s of like, they were just someone out of central casting, and then they played this vamp or whatever, and then that became who they became in the eye of the public, and so they played it up as who they were. But it's not something you see. You don't see like Mark Hamill like trying to like be a serene Jedi master like in real life. So it's an interesting evolution of the guy. And one of the things too, John Goodman in this movie, it does not feel that he tapped into that, because he does not feel like that in interviews at all.
Oh no, yeah. John Goodman's he's almost a chameleon. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
He can play I feel like he can play any type of character, but he particularly excels in characters that get to be loud in some way.
Yeah. And I think I did watch a few minutes of a making of thing on the Blu-ray I got. It was interesting because it did come out at the time, kind of as it was hitting VHS, I guess. And it's the Coen brothers. If you watch their interviews, will lead you to believe all of this is by the seat of their pants, which I kind of believe. And I just think they have such a shorthand and shared set of knowledge between themselves that they're able to go deep on things, because both of them get it and they're not worried about anybody else getting it than each other. But yeah, in the interview, they're just like, and it always been the thing I'd always been like, well, this is clearly just a Chandler thing, but you're 2 seconds into the thing, I'm like, well, we thought it'd be funny to do like, what if you did a Chandler story with a guy who had no idea what was going on? And I'm like, okay, I'm not wrong in what I thought this was about. And that's about as much thought as they'll lead you to believe they put into the movie. But you watch their films and you're like, there's so much depth here. And it's really weird because I feel like the Coen brothers are, as important as they were to kind of Gen X, have not made a transition to the next generations. Like, the kids know who Wes Anderson is, and they'll be mad at Scorsese for not liking Spider-Man. I'm not sure they've ever seen any Scorsese, but they'll be mad about that. But there's not like, and it may be that the kinds of movies they've been making since 2000 or so just haven't been picked up by younger people. Like, the last really popular thing I remember them doing was True Grit. I can't even remember their last theatrical release since Hail Caesar.
Oh, yeah. Hail Caesar was good, though.
Yeah, but it failed at the box office.
Yeah, it totally failed. And nobody talks about it anymore.
Yeah. And that had kind of been true of everything they'd been doing for a while. The most you've heard anything talked about was when one of them went off and did Shakespeare at the start of COVID, released Macbeth.
There's a popular GIF from the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, I think,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like the two guys on the gallows, and it's one of them going to the other first time.
Yeah.
That's as much as I feel like it's penetrated the perpetually online culture.
Yeah. And even that, like, I'd forgotten that had come out because of the way Netflix does its releases.
Yeah.
They've had a very weird career for years and years at this point, and it'd be nice to see them have a little renaissance. I don't know what it would take. I feel like Noah Hawley kind of picked up their reins and has been killing it over on FX with his TV show. But aside from that, it's tough for me to kind of point at what they're doing now that would have been relevant to people who are younger than us.
I just love how unpredictable their stuff is, though. Anytime if you see a Coen Brothers movie is coming out, it could literally be anything. It could be a screwball comedy.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a crime drama. It could be a musical. It could be anything.
Yeah. And they have really interesting
Shakespeare in black and white.
Yeah. They have really interesting ideas about what they feel they can say about people through their films that other movies would turn into deep, dark things, or feel that, they had to like blare music over the top of revelations or whatever about people. And I just feel like they're much better about understanding how character works on screen. And then a lot of what we see out there, and able to do it with a few lines of dialogue and a wig or whatever. Like they're remarkably good at it. I can't point to another movie that has dialogue like the bowling alley scenes.
Yeah.
Or even the scene, with Walter and the dude going to deliver the undies. It's just hard to think of who else is doing anything like that in this area. And I'm sure people are. I have seen some enjoyable stuff on TV that I could kind of go, oh, yeah, maybe I don't know if it'd be influenced by, but I could at least say someone thought about character enough to make the humor kind of come out of that rather than jokes or joke shaped things.
The humor, yeah. I mean, the humor all comes from character, and there's a lot of just texture in the throwaway stuff. There's a scene in particular in the Big Lebowski that I don't know if it means anything, but again, it's just fun to watch when the dude goes to see Maude again, Julianne Moore, and she's not there, and so he has to entertain himself with David Thewlis, her like, I guess, kind of artsy, pretentious artsy friend, right? And it's this uncomfortable moment of him just feel. I assume that the point of it was for him to just feel like he doesn't belong there, right? Because then, as he's trying to talk to her, she's having this parallel conversation with David Thewlis, who's laughing at things you don't know what he's laughing at, and then she starts to laugh at the same things, and he doesn't get the joke. Right. And it's just another indicator that he's out of his element, man. But that whole interchange is so fun and interesting and way more and not needed for this, for the all the exposition that had to happen was he had to go and visit Maude and she had to, give him the information, then on to the next scene. But to put that character there just adds so much more texture to the movie. And that's just one example. There's a bunch more examples like that in the movie.
It was again a twist kind of on Chandler, because there's always stuff in those books about what's kind of happening in high society and how detached they are from kind of the working man, and kind of what
real life,
what Marlowe is representing is kind of the smarter, scrappier working class guy with ethics, and the how the rich people that he sees in kind of book after book are just kind of detached from anything that they are told they need to do that is moral. Not to say that the David Thewlis character isn't moral, but the detachment from anything that makes sense, and like, oh, I can just laugh at you to your face because you don't matter, you're a real person, is definitely felt very Chandler-esque in its way, but was done in such a Coen Brothers way. It's nice. It's a nice, but yeah, you're right. The texture is just kind of there absolutely throughout. Including, the Brandt character, including the other guys in the bowling alley. I don't know who the actor was who was playing the partner of the Jesus, but that guy, he's just such a like normal looking dude.
I figured he wasn't an actor. I figured he was probably like the bowling, technical advisor or something. And they're like, this guy looks so authentic. We just want to get him in front of the camera.
Yeah. He's not from Central Casting. He's from like
he's great though. He adds great texture again. Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't have a ton else to say on the film. I think it's one thing you can talk about it in bits and pieces, and you can talk about it for days on end. People have been doing so. Do you have any last thoughts on it before we wrap it up?
No, only that I'm sure it'll only be a matter of weeks before I watch it again.
If you like the Big Lebowski, if you're the rare person who cannot stand this film and somehow made it to the end of this podcast, we'd really like to hear from you. You can find us at signal-watch.com. I'm at Mel Botus on Twitter. But feel free to reach out, comment. We'd love to hear from you, hear what you're thinking. I am trying to actually get through some more Coen brother films, just kind of catch as catch can, because of the aforementioned, like, do the kids even know about the Coen brothers? And even if they don't, Gen X does. Maybe we'll all enjoy revisiting some of their films. We did Miller's Crossing a couple of years ago. So you can look for that. I'm thinking about picking up one I haven't seen since the theater, and doing The Man Who Wasn't There. But anyway, we are that is what we are up to. Any where can they find you, Stuart? Do you want them to find you? Maybe not. I don't know.
They can find me on the Signal Watch podcast occasionally.
Yes. And I talk to Stuart sometimes on Slack, so it's possible that not on Slack, on Twitter. So it's possible you'll find Stuart on the Twitters. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we will be back soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Well, now when you're sitting there in your silk upholstered chair, talking to some rich folks that you know, well, I hope you don't see me in my ragged company. All that you know, I could never be alone. Take me down, little Susie, take me down.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Mel Botus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.